So let's take a look at 5 Bible verses that teach the law of attraction. Now, why are we doing this? Why are we looking to the Bible? As many of you know, I am not a Christian, nor am I religious, nor do I believe the Bible is the inerrant word of God. I don't believe that it is historically literal. However, I do believe that there is a lot of spiritual truth that is communicated in the Bible. And the reason why I'm making this video is to show you that these principles that are at the very core, the very foundation of the manifestation space of the law of attraction, the most important principles and concepts that you will hear in this space can be found in the Bible. And without having to do a ton of mental gymnastics either, in fact, the first verse we're going to look at is word for word manifestation language. And the reason I'm making this video is because a lot of people take a look at the principles that are found in the philosophy of manifestation and the law of attraction and law of assumption, and they label it New Age. In fact, that was a part of the reason why I got away from the law of attraction several years ago. A quick backstory on who I am. So here on this channel, I go by Eternal Don. Really, I just go by Don. You can call me Don. The Eternal is more of a play on my original branding, which is Young Don, right? The Eternal, it's just a nod to the spiritual aspect of this channel. Anyway, I have been a YouTuber for about 8 years. And when I originally became successful on YouTube, I did that using the law of attraction. I've spoken about this many times in the past. However, 2 things. One, my understanding of manifestation and the law of attraction and the law of assumption is exponentially deeper and more holistic than it was when I came into contact with the law of attraction. In fact, I see now that I didn't understand it completely, properly. I understood it enough to use it and build a successful YouTube career, but I didn't understand it deeply enough for it to truly penetrate the entirety of my life. And I truly believe that if I understood then what I know now, if I had a more holistic view of the law of attraction, law of assumption, and all of that, I would have stuck with it because I would have had plenty of evidence. However, everything works out in the end. Eventually, I got away from the law of attraction because I realized that this thing was labeled as New Age, and it was associated with hippies that smoke weed, girls with nose rings and henna tattoos and hairy armpits that don't use deodorant, and crystals and horoscopes and vegan diets, and like, oh, vegan diet. You know, it's funny, I was a vegan for multiple years. Anyway, point is, I was essentially convinced that the manifestation, the secret, the law of attraction, all of this stuff is new. These are new concepts that were created relatively recently, and it's bullshit. It's bullshit. And so even though I used the principles that I understood as best I understood them at the time, of the law of attraction to build a successful YouTube career. And by successful, I mean I built an animation channel that amassed over 2 million subscribers. It was making me over 6 figures in terms of money. It was successful. And I did that using the law of attraction. No shout outs, no help, I didn't put any money into advertising. Truly, I just manifested it. But as I came to understand that these philosophies at the core of the law of attraction were associated with this culture labeled the New Age, I started to think, oh, it's bullshit. Because if it's new, it's probably bullshit. It's probably some guy that just made this stuff up. Well, the reason I'm making this video is to show you that the core principles of the law of attraction, of manifestation, they can be found in the Bible. But not only can they be found in the Bible, you can find these principles expressed in spiritual books that predate the Bible by thousands of years. The point is, this isn't New Age. Crystals, henna tattoos, vegan diets, and all of the like. That culture that you think of when you think of New Age is completely separate from the principles that you learn in the manifestation space. They're biblical, but not only are they biblical, they predate the Bible. So let's go ahead and dive into that. So let's start with the first verse. Mark chapter 11, verse 24. Therefore, I say to you, whatever things you ask when you pray, believe that you receive them and you will have them. Whatever things you ask when you pray, whatever it is that you desire, look at what you need to do in order to receive them. It's not about whether or not you're worthy in the sight of God. It's not about whether or not you have done enough. It's not about any of those things. It's about whether or not you believe that you have received them. We see this exact argument or message articulated in another verse in the book of John. Believe that you receive them and you will have them. Guys, we could end the video right there. That is the law of assumption. That is the law of attraction. Whatever it is that you desire, whatever reality you wish to see manifested in the physical, you must assume the state of that reality already being true in your present world. And by doing that, you will bring it into your physical existence. You'll bring it into your physical reality. That is the law of assumption in a nutshell, articulated verbatim in the Bible. Now, again, we're going to explore a few examples of these concepts being spoken about in spiritual literature that predates the Bible, because I can easily see how a Christian might say, oh, well, this is true for Christians, but, the devil, he's taken these concepts and remixed it for a newer generation, and that's why it's New Age. Kind of like how Islam will say things that the Bible says, right? The Quran says things that the Bible says, and Christians will acknowledge, okay, well, that stuff is true, but Islam came after Christianity and they added a bunch of stuff and they twisted a bunch of stuff. And so if you want it, you got to go to the source. But reality is, these ideas, these concepts, a lot of times, even the articulation of these concepts can be found thousands of years before the Jews, before the Bible, before all of it. So there it is. Ask for anything, whatever you ask for. There are no limitations. There are no restrictions. It doesn't say you have to ask for a certain type of thing. It doesn't say you have to want a certain type of thing. It says whatever you want. Whatever you want. I challenge you to go to your pastor. Now, there are some Christians who understand this, believe it, and practice it. And so that's great. You don't have to not be a Christian to understand and apply these principles. But I want you to know, I love and respect Christians, Muslims, people from all walks of life I don't believe you need to abandon your religious faith in order to um, act upon or utilize these concepts. These are principles of the universe that are just true, and they're in the Bible. Okay, second verse. Now, Romans chapter 4, verse 17. God who gives life to the dead and calls those things which do not exist as though they did. So again, this is a perfect example of God speaking things into existence. Now, a Christian might say, well, okay, that is an ability that is reserved only for God. Jesus articulates this in the New Testament when he says, you shall do even greater works than I did. You shall do even greater works than I did. A lot of Christians don't believe that Jesus is speaking about spiritual power, nor do they believe Jesus when he says on multiple occasions in the New Testament that anything that you ask for, if you believe you have received them, they will be yours. It will be given to you. This is a promise. This is an assertion, but most Christians don't seem to believe this. How many Christians, how many pastors can you go to and say, look, if I truly believe that God will make me well, if I really believe it, I am guaranteed to get better. That must manifest in my reality. How many pastors will say that that is the truth? That's what the Bible says. But no prayer goes unanswered. Sometimes the answer is no. That just does not harmonize, however, with this promise, this assertion that is made by Jesus that anything you ask for, so long as you believe you will receive it. Now, a better excuse for why that may not happen would be that you didn't have enough faith. At least then that would be consistent with what Jesus said. It would also be consistent with the principles that are articulated in the law of attraction, the law of manifestation, that if you assume the state of the reality you wish to occupy, it with enough conviction, it will materialize in your physical reality because you are God, or at least you are yet another expression of God. The Bible would articulate it in this way. All humans are made in the image of God. So there is verse number 2. Verse number 3, Proverbs 23, verse 7. For as he thinks in his heart, so is he. Another very powerful verse that articulates a core fundamental concept in manifestation, in the law of attraction, the law of assumption. Whatever or whomever you believe yourself to be, not who you tell yourself you are, but who you believe yourself to be, that is who you will be. That is who you are. Somebody who considers themselves powerful, blessed, effective, loved. That is the reality he will experience. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So this can be extended to your external reality, or what you perceive as your external reality. Verse 4, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The evidence of things not seen. I remember when I was a Christian, I didn't understand this verse. It didn't make sense. How can faith be a substance. Well, what does this mean? Substance implies material. It implies matter of some sort. How can faith be evidence of something that isn't seen? Is not faith what you have to employ because of an absence of evidence? So how can faith be evidence? Faith is what is required when there is no evidence. That's why it's called faith. If you don't need faith that I'm talking to you right now. You don't need to put faith that I'm talking to you right now. You have the evidence. It's right in front of you. You don't need faith that 2 + 2 will always give you 4. So how can faith be evidence of anything? In the manifestation space, we understand that thoughts are things. And the moment you believe, the moment you assume the feeling of a particular reality, the moment there is conviction behind that, it already exists. It already exists in the spiritual plane, in the immaterial plane. And it is with persistent conviction, with time, we see that solidify and materialize in our physical realm. This is what is understood. And so your faith, your belief, your thoughts are literally the building blocks, the matter of that which is hoped for. It exists. It already exists in the immaterial, and now you're just waiting for it to arrive in the physical. But it's not a kind of waiting that is desperate or anxious. It is a knowing. It is a being convinced that it is already done. It is already finished. And you're just waiting for it to appear in the physical. But even if it doesn't, you're already reaping the benefits of knowing that it is so. A perfect example of that would be if you assume the state of being healed from an illness, even though you assume that state and you believe that you are healed, and you go to the hospital and the doctor takes an evaluation, does an evaluation of your current state and says, "Oh no, you're still sick," right? The things, the cancer, the disease is still in your body. We see it right here. Somebody who truly believes, somebody who truly assumes the state of the reality that he wishes to see manifested in the physical, he has the same degree of relaxation and peace that he would get if the doctor were to take a look at his results and say, "You are healed." That is what it really looks like when you really believe. That's what Jesus was saying. If you believe you have received it, it will be yours. And this is why many Christians feel like their prayers are unanswered or go unanswered. And of course, some of them, they cope and say, "Oh no, well, my prayers were answered. God just said no." No. Because they pray for healing and then they go to the doctor and they're anxious. What are the results going to be? Did God heal me? Did God heal me? Then they get the results. No, you're still sick. Oh, I guess God said no. Never for a single moment did they believe. True faith, true belief looks like this. It is finished. I am healed. They go to the doctors, look at the results. Oh no, it still looks like you're sick. No, I'm not. It hasn't materialized yet in the physical, but I'm healed. I know that I'm healed. That is what real faith looks like. And that is something that I never, in my 3 years of being a devout Christian and listening to different pastors of different denominations, even the overly zealous Pentecostal types that believe in praying in tongues and casting out demons, I never once heard this articulated. Now, you might actually hear it in a realm of Christianity that is known as prosperity Christianity, but this subset of Christianity is oftentimes demonized. Imagine that, being demonized for spreading the idea that God wants you to be happy, healthy, and wealthy. Oh my, so terrible. Anyway, so there you go. Faith as substance. And then lastly, Matthew chapter 9, verse 29. Then he touched their eyes, talking about Jesus, saying, according to your faith, let it be to you. According to your faith. So in this instance, some blind people, they approach Jesus and they are asking to be healed. But what does Jesus say? Jesus says, according to your faith. So it really had nothing to do, well, I won't say nothing, but this wasn't about Jesus just exercising his spiritual power. Why does the faith of the people who are being healed, why does that matter? We imagine, at least in Christianity, Jesus is imagined as essentially like a superhero. Think about Superman. Well, Superman's ability to exercise his powers is never contingent on whether or not the people around him believes that he has superpowers. Doesn't matter if you believe that Superman can shoot lasers from his eyes or fly or you have superhuman strength. Those are just his powers. And that's oftentimes how Jesus is thought about. Yet here we see Jesus saying that your ability to be healed is actually determined by your faith, not mine. We see this further expressed in Mark chapter 6, verses 4 through 6. And Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor, except in his own country and among his own kin, and in his own house. And he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands upon a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. And he went among the villages teaching. Pay close attention. He could, not he wouldn't, but he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands upon a few sick people and healed them. He was unable, incapable of healing these people because of a lack of their faith, or their lack of faith. Now, here a Christian might say, well, no, Jesus is God, all-powerful, all-knowing. And it wasn't really that he couldn't in the sense that he was incapable. It means he wasn't allowed to. Maybe the Father said to him, hey, if they don't show the right kind of faith, don't heal them, right? Maybe Jesus had some kind of idea here that, oh, well, I need your faith to, that's what's going to incentivize me to actually heal you. If I don't really feel like you got faith like that, I'm not going to heal you. However, I can show you that this is inconsistent with the rest of the Bible. Take a look at this. John chapter 2, verse 11. This beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So this is referring to the first miracle that Jesus performed, turning water into wine. Observe, it was done so that his disciples would believe in him. His disciples believed in him precisely because he performed the miracle. So it would make no sense that Jesus wouldn't perform a miracle of healing the blind or healing people or doing any other miracle for that matter, because of other people's unbelief. Nobody believed him before he turned the water into wine. So why could he do it then and win souls, win followers and disciples, and not do it in his hometown? If anything, that would have been the perfect opportunity to convince these people so that they could be healed and they could be saved. But yet that's not what happens. Okay, again, John chapter 11, verse 42 to 45. This is talking about the raising of Lazarus from the dead. I knew that you always hear me, but because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me. Then many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen the things Jesus did believed in him. Again, another example of Jesus performing a miracle for the sake of convincing unbelievers. John chapter 6, verse 2, healing the sick. Then a great multitude followed him because they saw his signs, which he performed on those that were diseased. And so, again, people following him, people who did not previously believe in him, believing in him because they saw miracles. And then John chapter 20, verse 30 through 31, it says, and truly Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. Even you, the reader, are expected to believe that Jesus is the Son of God because of the accounts of these miracles. So over and over and over again, we see Jesus performing miracles, which then convert unbelievers. So why would, in his hometown, there be a situation where he could not perform miracles because of the lack of the faith of other people? It actually makes a lot of sense when you understand. See, if you actually take a look at all the miracles that Jesus performs, they were either miracles that only involved him or miracles that involved people that believed in him. Go ahead, take a look through the New Testament. Every miracle that Jesus performed either only involved him or people who already had faith in him, people who were desperate, people who were sick, people who saw him do miracles on even other people who already believed in him. Or a situation like turning water into wine, that doesn't involve anybody else. Hoisting fish from the water, from the sea, that doesn't involve anybody else's faith. They didn't even know what he was even getting at when Jesus instructed them to cast the net to the other side of the boat, speaking to the disciples, and they hauled in more fish than they could even fit in the boat. They weren't aware that Jesus was about to perform a miracle. So in all those situations, the only person's faith that mattered was Jesus's, which of course Jesus is described as the perfect follower of God. So of course he had the perfect and most powerful type of faith. But we also see it being performed on people who already believe in him, especially the sick. Why was the sick so quick to believe in Jesus? Because they were desperate. They were in a terrible place. They've tried everything to get better. Or they had some kind of disease like leprosy, which, as far as they were concerned, is incurable, or blindness. And so what do you got to lose? And it is by witnessing people receiving these kinds of miracles, these kinds of healings, that then unbelievers, they could then believe. And so the people who already had faith, they were healed, which is why Jesus said, according to your faith, let it be. And then, of course, Jesus's faith was essentially maxed out. And so he could do all that dope shit like fly around and phase through walls, and even the raising of the dead. That was involving a person who wasn't conscious. Their faith was irrelevant. So, again, the Bible is revealing here that it is your faith, it is your belief that moves the power of God in your universe. And that's why so many prayers go unanswered, because a lot of Christians pray expecting that the power is in the hands of an external source. They believe that somebody else out there, they're going to shoot a wish out to, shoot a request out to, and it's up to them to decide yay or nay. And as long as you're a good little boy or a good little girl and you're not breaking too many rules, kind of like being on Santa's nice list, maybe God will gift you what you asked for. This is not how we see miracles happen in the Bible. This is not what we see Jesus instructing you to do. What we see Jesus instructing you to do, and what we see in regards to how miracles actually happen, is in perfect alignment with the principles expressed in the manifestation space. You must believe. It is based on your faith. So there we have it. There we have it. Another perfect example to put a bow on what I just showed you was in Matthew chapter 14, verses 28 to 30. And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, bid me come to you on the water." He said, "Come." Jesus said, "Come to Peter." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." It was Peter's faith that allowed him to walk out on the water, not the power of Jesus, not it wasn't Jesus magic. It was the power of God that is within all of us, that is equally accessible to all of us. And of course, I'm not even asserting that these events literally happened. I believe that these spiritual truths are often communicated in stories that predate the Bible. This is just another iteration of these concepts, these truths being articulated to a particular people of a particular culture. And so, but hey, maybe they happened. I don't know. I don't believe they did, but that's besides the point. The point here is that, again, we see the principle of Peter's faith dictating him sinking or swimming. See, if it was Jesus's power that was causing him to walk on water, he would never sink. Because if it was just based on Jesus's faith and his power and his access to God's energy and God's power, then Peter would never sink. But because it was based on Peter's faith, when he started to have fear, which if you go and revisit that video we did a few videos ago, how to manifest, even if you suck at visualization, and we went through the various emotions and the energetic frequencies that align with those emotions, then you will remember or see that fear is at the very bottom. And so completely throwing water, it's the opposite of faith. It is the opposite of believing. It is the opposite of living in the state already fulfilled. Because if it was fulfilled, why would you be afraid of the opposite being true? There is no place for fear where there is perfect faith. And so Peter starts to sink. Again, law of attraction, law of assumption. There it is in the Bible. Now, I would like to show you that these concepts actually predate the Bible. Okay, so in the Hermetic writings, these are Egyptian spiritual writings, 2 to 1000 BCE. Very old. So, as early as 2000 years before Jesus. We see the Hermetic principle of mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. The law of attraction, the law of assumption, manifestation, we understand that all of reality is a product of your mind. There is no external, there is no internal. There is no physical. It's an illusion, the physical. Everything is a projection of your mind, your entire experience of reality. And so the universe is mental. As a man thinks, so is he. Okay, second example, ancient Egyptian Heka before 2000 BC. So this is even older than the Hermetic writings. Heka was the spiritual force activated through speech. Priests and kings used spoken incantations to shape reality and command spiritual forces. Heka was both a god and a technique, much like how affirmations are used today. Parallels with let there be light in Genesis and Proverbs 18:21, life and death are in the power of the tongue. Zoroastronism, ancient Persia, 1000 BCE. Zoroastrianism emphasized the power of free will and mental focus. Choosing truth and righteousness, Asha creates harmony. Falsehood leads to chaos. Inner belief and moral alignment were seen as co-creative forces with God. So you are a co-creator with God. This is another fundamental principle in regards to the law of attraction and manifestation. We understand that we are all one, and we are all one with God. We are all manifestations of God. The one eternal divine mind has divided itself and expressed itself in individuals, the form of human beings, potentially as other beings as well, but we can only speak from our perspective as humans, right? And so this divine eternal mind that has expressed itself, we all have access. And it doesn't judge. It doesn't tell us what we can create, what we can or cannot bring into existence. All that is required is that we desire it and we focus upon it. And we believe it. And then it will come into reality. And then we can look at 1500 to 800 BCE in India. As you think, so you become. This is a concept in Hinduism, right? As one thinks, so one becomes. This is verbatim from the Hindu Vedas, which is a Hindu holy book which predates the Bible. It says, as one thinks, so one becomes. The idea that your inner state creates your outer world is central to yogic and Vedantic philosophy. So, just to give you some examples of how these core concepts have been understood and taught and shared long before the Bible or the characters of the Bible supposedly walked the earth. So, I hope that helps to give you some amount of comfort. This can give comfort to multiple people. If you're already a religious person, if you are a Christian, maybe even if you're a Muslim or belong to another religion, it can give you comfort that you are not practicing anything that God tells you not to practice by implementing these principles of manifestation, the law of assumption. If you want to go to church every Sunday and pray to Jesus and all of that, then it does not contradict these principles. Jesus taught them. However, maybe you aren't particularly religious, maybe you're an ex-Christian, and these concepts, they sound enticing, but maybe you're a bit skeptical. Is this just some bullshit that somebody in a fucking, trance state on mushrooms came up with in the 60s? Is this some bullshit that young Don is just spouting? Well, there it is in the Bible, and before the Bible even. And so you don't have to worry about that. And ultimately, that's how I came back to this philosophy and dove deeper and now understand it on a deeper level. This is precisely because I spent 3 years as a devout Christian. See, I didn't know all this shit was in the Bible when I heard about the law of attraction. And so when I heard the accusations that the law of attraction is New Age, I threw it out with horoscopes and vegan diets and acai bowls and flip-flops and all that shit. And having gone through Christianity and seeing that these principles are actually in the Bible, understanding that these are thousands of years old, you could call it a lot of things, but you can't call it New Age. Nothing's new about it. It's older than the Bible, many of these concepts. The Bible is more new than these concepts. So I hope that helps.